Welcome to the Intercut podcast channel, the weekly place to hear the latest on movie, TVs, and entertainment that people can't cut away from. I'm your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, he sees dead people. It's Arturo Zurita.
I wish I saw the green M. Night Shyamalan did, because that man has banked on himself, deposited, and continues to.
Definitely, yeah. He has done a lot in his career, and one of those things is make movies that do very well at the box office. We will be talking about all those movies soon, and we are joined by someone who we're on the same curve. We're just on opposite ends. It's Ewan Graff from Quiet on Set. What's going on, Ewan? Thanks for coming back for another Filmmaker Bracket.
No worries. Ready to talk about everything M. Night. I mean, he has the perfect amount of movies to talk about. 16 on the dot.
Perfect, right?
Made for a bracket.
It's tailor-made for a bracket, so there's no better time to get into this, not just because of the release of Trap, but because M. Night is just one of the more interesting filmmakers we have out there. Manoj Nelliyathu Shyamalan, born in India but immigrated to the U.S. when he was just 6 weeks old, a Pennsylvania resident from youth until today. Does the state proud, really like that, how often he sets his films in and around Philadelphia. But M. Night has really developed a pretty unique reputation among Hollywood directors. You know, we normally do these brackets about people like Christopher Nolan or Steven Spielberg and David Fincher, Denis Villeneuve, people who I think inarguably have made several movies that can be considered modern classics. And Shyamalan's done that in his own way, but not necessarily in the same way as those other auteurs. He is more of like he's kind of developed into more of the master of like the 3-star movie. I think a lot of his films, especially the back half, have this really interesting aura, but they're not necessarily as great as some of the films that we consider his classics. There are some classics in there. But given the full arc of that career, Art, let me start with you. What is it that you think of when you hear the phrase an M. Night Shyamalan movie? What does that mean to you?
It's most basic, I think, it's what everyone's associated with him. You hear Shyamalan, you think twist. And I think that's almost become the thing that he's been trapped into, and I think that's a big part of his newer movies and what he's like trying to showcase. I think even his daughter says that with The Watchers, of like, are you presenting a show to these beings, this audience that watches you? And I think you see a through line for a lot of his movies and how he's trying to set it up, how he can subvert your expectations to the point that it did become something that he was kind of like stagnant in. But I think a majority of the time it's more so a perspective thing. I think what's become to us as a third act twist is really to him like, were you seeing the point of view of the characters properly? And I think that's what he's always liked, because you have two stories for M. Night of the kid who started off with Signs, and then to him it's like, no, I'm the guy who started off with two movies that we're going to mention in this bracket that people may have not heard of, and that's what got him to become who he is. So to him it's like he started low, went high, went low, went high, went low again. So he's seen the pattern, whereas to many people, they see the trajectory a little differently. And I think that all, comes to M. Night's plate when it comes to him telling a story, including his own, in a way that isn't usually the standard. But I think he has a lot of heart. I think what a lot of people see as like melodrama or maybe very stagey acting usually has a purpose for it. Even if I may not be vibing with it, and I agree with you, maybe sometimes a little bit worse than a 3-star movie, but he's willing to take swings. And I think one of the best outlooks that I saw was that in Signs, there's that sequence where Joaquin Phoenix's character is talked about as being a guy who had the home run record. But in order to have that home run record, he also had another record, and that was the most strikeouts, because he's always taking big swings, and that's it.
Absolutely. Ewan, does that resonate with your opinion of M. Night Shyamalan as a filmmaker?
The funny thing is, I definitely need to preface this at the start. I will argue for either side, but I come into this being a bit of an M. Night doubter. If I'm personally honest, I'm a bit of a hater. Yeah. I've
in broad daylight on night.
I'm sorry, in broad daylight against night. Yeah. It's but to me, I feel like what you just mentioned, Art, is like him it's basically to me explaining every single thing, and there's a rhyme and reason to everything, even if it's like supernatural everything, and that to me takes a lot out of the experience at times, and paired with the dialogue, it's really tough for me to then get into it. But I feel like he does have a ton of heart, and you can see really his filmmaking style. Like, it's not just random or just bad writing. Even if I perceive it to be bad writing, I think it's intentional. Maybe it doesn't work for me most of the time, but then he has those hits that highs and lows. But he, like, regardless, every movie of his is worth seeing because it's interesting, at least, even if it's like horrible. So he's a fascinating filmmaker.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that you mentioned there, Ewan, with his dialogue, with the types of swings he takes, he establishes this really unique tone, and it's funny to look back on his career because, like, to really reduce it down, people refer to M. Night as like a horror filmmaker, right? But like, so many of the films are not what we think of when we think of horror movies. Like, there are folk horror elements and there are psychological horror elements, but like, ultimately a lot of his movies, they have this slightly comedic tone. They're not all in out comedies, but he is trying to make you laugh in just about every one of his movies. And they're also often, as Art was talking about, full of heart, full of characters who are really finely crafted. I think a lot of times we think of protagonists in horror aren't always so three-dimensional as you get in an M. Night Shyamalan film. And the way that he's able to be so sincere within a genre that is often really cynical, I think is something that makes the experience of an M. Night movie really, really unique, and something that rubs people the wrong way. And there's definitely films where that balance is totally off for me. I don't love every M. Night Shyamalan movie, but there's also movies where that balance is really special, and there are few filmmakers working in that register, if any, beyond him. Given the ups and downs, though, that you mentioned about his career, Art, do you feel like he's settled into like a comfortable place where people kind of accept what M. Night is, or do you feel like we're still missing something from what he's making?
I think that's a twofold answer right there, but I don't even think it's the audience. I think it's him. I think he stopped caring about the audience and he's at peace with himself. He talks a lot about in interviews where he thinks he's got people figured out, and then glass like bombs, and he goes, what am I supposed to do? And I think it's him seeing that trajectory of like, I want people to know that I didn't come off the gate with a winner. I let up there. So I have reasons, for my mistakes, or to understand how do I make a movie, what can I fix the next time. I love that in Trap, he just ignores everything from After Earth until The Visit comes out. That he mentioned Split, but he doesn't mention Glass. What just came out? Knock at the Cabin, or the other one. It's almost like he knows. Like, he is aware of what the audience has perceived. He knows when he's going for a swing. But I think a big part of that is that he's almost turned into Blumhouse. The best example that I could give of this man is that with him funding his own movies, it's like Blumhouse, where he keeps the budget low, he doesn't overspend, and it's all reliance on the idea. And whether it's good or not, you make enough to be able to continue making ideas. And he's willing to take more swings than wait 5-10 years, like I don't know, kind of wish he did, in order to create this really big project, right? I think the early stuff in his career, to me, is way better than the second half. And I think the two approaches is how he is now funding his own films and how he's put his family first. I think he still has the same heart, but there was more cohesion. And I feel like people keep comparing him to like other artists. No. Just compare him to the early half of his career. Now he's willing to put his kids first. He's putting his kids in the movies. And while I do think it's changed the trajectory of how he makes films, I don't think he minds it. And I think that's been his decision. He wants to do something crazy like that. So when we talk about like the closest thing I could think of is musical artists like Kanye wanting to try a different sound, knowing that people aren't going to like it, but he's trying to do something new. And I think that's why we still go to M. Night movies. Even when you look at the track record and you go, how are these still coming out to theaters? We have never had to worry that his movies are going to come out to streaming because of how he's able to flip them. So I missed the first half of Shyamalan. I think he was a little bit more cohesive, but, you know.
But you said with like the heart of it all, we talked about this when we reviewed Trap, is that I feel like at the core of pretty much all of his movies, is a really good idea. And
Every
that
single
makes
one.
it exciting that it's like that
Good marketing?
well, I wouldn't say I don't know about the marketing, but just to like then you kind of make up what a M Night movie could be before you go into it, and like that's exciting. It already is ripe for a bunch of theories and stuff like that, and you usually don't really get that outside of like franchises that are established and based on IP. And he has been able to create that kind of fandom and excitement around him. And I mean, that's just really impressive. And making money from his own, like funding it himself, I feel like that's always something to be praised, even if you don't enjoy the stuff.
And the longevity. I think The Village was the first one that he said he did that for. He banked all in, and I mean, that was 04. So we're like just the career, the longevity to have 20 years, to have the ability to make movies and mess up. I think is profound in and of itself.
And it also, I think, has given him the freedom to make movies that feel uniquely him. You know, he doesn't often feel like he is doing something within a studio's mold. And when he feels closer to doing something that's a studio version of filmmaking, those are his worst movies. So, I mean, he's charted a really unique path. And I really like that point that you have, Ewan, about the simplicity of a lot of the selling point of a lot of his ideas, right? Like you can reduce all his films to a tagline, and there's something really pure about the cinema experience when like that's all you need to get you in the door, right? Like
I mean, his titles are just like.
But that's the difference, though. It's like The Beach That Gets Old. Everybody knows it. That Knock at the Cabin already did the work for you. The one where they set up the trap. Like everyone's gonna know that if you ever do another heist or whatever thriller in that setting, he's a genius. He's marketed that. But the difference between those and the earlier movies where you went, the one where he was dead the whole time, is that you go back and watch that and everything else in the movie is just as good as that revelation. Nothing is as good as The Beach That Gets Old once you're watching The Beach where they get old.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or after they knock.
Yeah.
All right, well, I do want to... well, let's talk about the movies, right? I want to do something a little bit different than we normally do and kind of just go through the filmography, because I think the journey of M. Night is really interesting, and then we'll break it down in the bracket a little more quickly. But, M. Night, he first comes onto the scene with a film it's listed as 1992, but it seems to say that it premiered at AFI Fest in 93. So I'm going to go 93. This film, Praying with Anger, a movie that he made while he was still a film student at NYU. So it is kind of a student film. And for a lot of people who are mistakenly think that The Sixth Sense was his first movie, he's actually got two movies beforehand. This one particularly notable because he doesn't just write and direct this one, he produces it, he stars in it. He's not just a cameo, he is the lead actor in this movie. And it's a film that follows a young Indian American who returns to India and discovers where Western ideas come into conflict with Indian culture. It's interesting in the sense that it is this sort of like exploration of being caught between racial identities. And I feel like right now in indie dramas, you see a lot of movies like this that are exploring this. And to be doing this in the early 90s is really like ahead of time. You know, the culture was a lot more racist at that point. And there's a lot of really good ideas that are in this. I just kind of feel like they're all handled with a bit of a cringeworthy sincerity that it doesn't really work. It's got this terrible melodramatic dialogue that to me sounds more like an American projecting their anxieties onto a foreign culture than like how foreign people might actually speak. But like I do think there's hints of an interesting filmmaker there. Like he's already pretty confident behind the camera. Art, I know you caught this one on YouTube as well, which is a bit unfortunate because it is not the best quality video or audio wise. But what was your takeaway from Praying with Anger?
Very similar, especially when we look at a lot of earlier films when we do these brackets and we see, the quality of it, the approach to it. But I do think that perspective of him being the outsider, I think, speaks to a lot of what he would end up going through in his career with being a man named M. Night Shyamalan. Yep. He added the night to himself. Like that wasn't his given name. He chose that when he was in college. And it, I think, helped kind of push the idea of him being a horror director when you have a name that's so prolific like that. But I feel like what he touches on here is not something that he touches on further in his filmography. I think this is the point where he's the most, I don't even want to say political, but in a sense actually talking about culture and the nuances that come with that. Everything else ends up being more of a human experience, and everybody else kind of gets along, and it's just the internal things. But here there is this external thing. He is the outsider in India, and he does things that allow him to not fit in. And I thought it was interesting. This would be one where it was just like I'd be curious to see how he would remake it now.
Right. As a non-student filmmaker,
Because we're saying, right, he had a lot to say, made this, would make another one, but then he figured it out with Sixth Sense. Oh, okay. How would you redirect this? That would be very fascinating for me. Or if he just touched these subjects again, I think that would be interesting to come from M. Night.
Yeah, no, and it's an interesting point you make, because like for our perhaps most prominent Indian American filmmaker, he does not really touch on his Indian Americanness very much in his films.
Was that a lesson he learned?
Perhaps that this is a movie that did not get distribution. Yeah.
And thus the rest of the films he went, maybe if I don't go there, boom. I learned that lesson in Success.
I mean, a lot of his cast is like there's not a lot of people of color in his cast. Maybe recently Avatar? A bit more. Didn't they? The whitewashing of those characters.
The whitewashing for the leads, but that was like the only time where he did it for the Fire Nation, and I was like, oh, okay, here we go. I guess we're starting it.
Yeah.
Of course, Midsize Sedan. Can't forget. Can't forget from old.
No, but also speaking of films that didn't go so well, there's After Earth, but we will get to those, because after he made Praying with Anger a few years later, he was able to make another film, not yet Sixth Sense. In 1998, he made the film Wide Awake, which was not on my radar really. I had very little knowledge of this until I watched it for this podcast, and I was not prepared for what I saw, because this is a movie about a 10-year-old boy who goes on a personal journey to find God after his grandfather passes away. And watching at first, you're almost waiting for some like irony, some joke to break the sincerity of it, but this is a very pure kids movie about the search for meaning in a cruel world, and on that level I kind of dug it, and I think it structurally works. I could see watching it on the Disney Channel as a kid, but it's also not very good. It is sort of like a step removed from pure flicks. Art, I know that's a little more your territory. Is that the feeling you got from Wide Awake?
It's cute, and I think I saw this before I knew it was an M. Night movie.
Really?
So, like, finding out, like, wait, this was yours? What the heck? It's like when you realize, like, oh, he did Stuart Little. He just didn't get to direct it. Like, that he wrote all of these other things that were out there. This one, I think, speaks to his themes. Again, he fixes his direction. He sees, okay, don't be too heavy-handed in some things like this. He almost learned to keep, like, the spirituality of it in the background. I think you compare this with Signs, and you see like, oh, okay, there is a through line. You do have this undercurrent of faith throughout your movies. And you see it in the one previous to this, but especially in this one, it's like it's a thing he likes to have in the forefront. So it's a good one in his filmography to understand his viewpoint of the world, especially with that ending. Direction-wise, not making the top of the list.
No. For sure. But it is kind of cute, I guess.
I
Rosie O'Donnell's in it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I like the journey that he has the kid go on, you know, because it shows like he does have this belief in something bigger, and that's something that I think he carries throughout his movies.
Definitely, yeah. That search for faith or search for meaning through religion is something that definitely will carry through his career.
Yeah, I feel like this starts for me to trend. I'm labeled on our podcast as the child hater. I never claimed it myself. It was given to me, and I wear it with pride. But this, the child performance is rough. Unfortunately, really rough in this. And I initially, when I watched it, I watched a lot of his stuff for the first time, all like back to back to back, right as Knock at the Cabin came out. So this felt a bit like a fever dream to go through the worlds that he had created. And I feel like it's one of the things that are like very easily something that bother me when at the core you have an idea and you're not able to communicate it due to maybe the screenplay not really working, or like the weird dialogue coming off even weirder because it is a kid, and then it's even tougher to get across maybe what you want to bring across, or is that the intention? It just left me confused.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It also ends up being the
I
kid
feel
from.
like it's about the same quality wise as like his first one though. I feel like they both have something interesting there, but
Yeah.
didn't enjoy neither of them, unfortunately.
Yeah, not fully realized.
The kid was also in Jack Frost, so he was on a roll in 1998.
There we go. Big year
Joseph Cross.
for Joseph Cross. Yeah.
Stuart Little, I guess, was technically my first M. Night movie because for a long time I thought that was a Swiss German movie because they dubbed it in Swiss German, which they never do. They rarely do that for anything. So I had always thought, oh yeah, that's just New York right around outside the corner. That's got to be somewhere here in our country.
Definitely. 1999, which we're about to get to, was a very big year for M. Night because he did some uncredited screenwrites on She's All That. And he also, as we were talking about, wrote the screenplay for Stuart Little. You definitely see a lot more of that in Wide Awake than you do in his other 1999 movie, which was The Sixth Sense, the movie that kind of really put him on the map. Often, as I said, misattributed as his first movie. It's his third. Sixth Sense is about a child psychologist that visits a young patient who says he can see and talk to dead people, and it has perhaps the most iconic twist ending in all of film. Like, it's kind of become synonymous with the term twist ending, as Art was alluding to before. This is kind of the critical height of M. Night's career. The film will be nominated for 6 Oscars, and M. Night will get 2 nominations for himself as well, original screenplay and director. And this was the second highest grossing movie of 1999 behind Star Wars Episode 1. Ewan, what was it about The Sixth Sense that really feels like it stands out?
So a bit of a spoiler here. This is when the M. Night hatred starts. Where I like the movie and it's fine to me. I definitely need to rewatch it. But when I saw it for the first time, I saw it late. I've seen it for the first time, I think, like 4 or 5 years ago. I just saw, like, I knew the twist was coming. And then I feel like everything leading up to it was so obviously leading me towards that like, maybe you'd appreciate it more in the little hints, but I never thought they were little. Stuart Little I liked, but not these big hints. And it took away a lot for me to actually enjoy it. I feel like I'd hate it. I'd like it a bit more on a rewatch. But the direction is really like going on a breakdown page of like what's all in there and the references to foreshadowing. I feel like it's the perfect movie to get someone into film and then show him, hey, this is a filmmaking term that like what he's doing here. It feels super technical to me, but never getting to experience it like for the first time really, because I had seen it so broken apart already. It took a lot away for me, but I know I'm on the outside on this.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because this is one of the most like spoiled film endings of all time out there. I also had the experience of not watching it clean. Like, I knew what the twist was going to be, but I feel differently than you. Like, I was still absorbed by it. I really like The Sixth Sense. Art, I'm assuming you also were spoiled before you got to see the movie.
No, I was there 1999, a little whippersnapper. Called it right before it happened.
Caitlin somehow never got spoiled. I don't know how you can live a life like that.
Maybe just not connecting it?
Yeah, maybe.
You know, I guess maybe one of those things like that. You and you wrong, bro. I don't know what you're talking about. You got Toni Collette here. Toni Collette killing it in multiple scenes. You're like, oh, I remember this scene. She was really good in this one. Then you see the car scene. There's an accident that happened, a little bit of her face. Her acting in that scene is fantastic. Haley Joel Osment still being dropped in some of the best rap songs of the decade that just came out. This is being mentioned at the beginning of diss tracks. Like, the culture shift that this movie did is incredible. It's fantastic. And maybe that. It carries so much hype that for many people, it's almost like seeing Fight Club and knowing what happens there as well. Because Fight Club would be one where it wasn't ruined for me, so I got to experience that there. But to me, I think like everybody knows what the twist is in this, but you still go in there, and I think that's what I'm saying, the drama of it.
Once you see
from his new stuff, once you get what the bit is, okay, I don't really want to sit here with mid-sized sedan, but here, I think the performances from Bruce Willis, Haley Joel Osment, Toni Collette, it adds a lot to it, and it's I'm blanking on who did the joke. It's probably a Chappelle joke. The idea that a man kind of spoil the movie, but the idea that it was more obvious for all of America that they were arguing with each other, not talking, being more feasible than what it ends up being is just a hilarious take on where we were in 1999, that no one just saw the clues.
Right. After The Sixth Sense, he makes Unbreakable in 2000. The film is about a man who survives a train crash with no injuries, then discovering he has superhuman abilities, which catches the attention of a disabled comic book store owner. Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson in the lead roles. Art, a lot of times people attribute this as like one of the first or best comic book movies. Do you feel like it gets overlooked in those discussions?
Every single day. Especially with what this man did after the fact with those sequels. I think he almost like ruined the legacy of what this movie really had going for it, because it not just precedes everything, you can watch it now and it holds up because of it's almost like it didn't do well because comic books weren't at the forefront and they didn't think they could sell it. Now that we're overselling comic books, it feels like the most refreshing thing to catch. And yet those sequels felt like the antithesis of why this one stands out so much. I love it. I love it because it's like the lore of comics themselves, the idea of good versus evil, and I think the characters are really fascinating. This was one that I made sure to add on my rewatch, just to not downplay it. To me, it still holds up.
Yeah, I would agree with you. For me, this is one of the great superhero films of all time. It held up on my rewatch of it. Ewan, is this one of the ones that you
I like this one. I like
Great.
Yeah.
Breakthrough.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we'll discuss it a bit more because I feel like it has a shot of boxing its way a bit more further into the bracket. Hopefully, it's up there for me.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah,
like it
I mean,
quite a
this is a hell of a run that M. Night is on, because he goes from Sixth Sense to Unbreakable to Signs in 2002, a film about a former priest who discovers crop circles in his cornfield. And, this is maybe a little less hard tinged than some of the other stuff. This has got, elements of sci-fi and fantasy and just very whimsical in kind of a Spielbergian sense, which makes sense why around this time, Time magazine put M. Night on the cover and dubbed him the next Spielberg. I don't know how much that holds up in certain regards, because M. Night, like we talked about this, he's got this very pure cinema idea behind his films. They're very resonant. They're very marketable. They're very easy to pitch. And despite often having sort of scary elements, they kind of really like are like a big tent. They're not really for niche audiences. I think everybody could kind of get on board with an M. Night movie. But I think he also shares some similar qualities to Spielberg in how he kind of commands the camera. Most people that are interested in stuff like this have seen the Every Frame of Painting video on the Spielberg Oneers. M. Night is an expert at those Spielberg Oneers, taking a shot that goes like from a bird's eye and then comes down and becomes a two shot before it pulls into a close up. And I think Signs, he really gets to flex with that as well. Definitely one of the stronger films in his resume. Art, I know this is one of your favorites from him, right?
Yeah, on the rewatch, because it wasn't my number one, but it's been battling up there. I thought the rewatch was fantastic. I think this is one that really holds up. And to go off the visual language thing, I think in his later half, the newer stuff, I think that's where he's really speaking with his cinematic technique.
Totally.
Over the performances and everything else. Not that the most recent performances have been bad, but I do think that that's the one aspect of his directing that has gotten better. How he plays with the camera. That has progressively over his writing and everything else. But I also think when you're talking about Spielberg, I don't think Spielberg leaves you unhappy. And that's also been the critique for Spielberg, that he's so mainstream but is able to have like, no, you are a really good filmmaker. You're artsy. You know how to meet both at the same at that point of art and commerce. This man, right after Signs, decides to do the complete opposite. You cannot tell me that Signs doesn't have a happy ending. What's the damage in Sixth Sense? Bro, from The Village on, he does endings where he's not afraid to piss people off. That's where he stops becoming Spielberg. And the worst thing that they could have put on him was that he was supposed to deliver what Spielberg gives you there. He was only going to deliver you what M. Night was going to give you. And that's a part of this whole bit of like, who writes your narrative for you? How does M. Night get to be M. Night? And I think that's where he's barely reaching it at the end of this career. Right now, at this point in his career, people are finally able to be willing to take the swings. Hey, it's okay if it ends up as a sad ending or something else. But I think the Time magazine did the worst thing for him at this crux, because I didn't mind the swing that he took afterwards with The Village. But to me, Signs is again the movie you said you didn't like, Wide Awake.
Right.
It's got the same religious undertones, but actually done with a much better directing style.
Yeah, and sort of speaking to what Ewan was saying, where he has the ideas but not necessarily the platform for them. Here, he's taking those ideas from Wide Awake and not making them so literal, not making them literally like a kid in Catholic school searching for God, but then transplanting it onto this science fiction idea. And when he's able to like have those things in resonance, I think that's when his movies are the most special.
Isn't that funny though? He's like, I can't say God, but I can say the aliens came down, and now his face, is back. It's like he cracked the code. He's like, how can I say it like 3 points off?
Yeah. You
and Mel
Village.
Gibson, no business being that good in that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I a despicable human being, but a genuine movie star.
Killed it.
He follows that up in 2004 with The Village, a period thriller about people from a remote village who live in fear of creatures that lurk in the woods just outside town. And in a lot of ways, this is sort of the start of the fall of M. Night. It's doesn't get terrible reviews, but maybe like mixed to negative reviews. But it starts the downward trend in terms of how people receive his movies. But there are some defenders of it. Ewan, now that you've seen like the full breadth of his career, do you think this is like a overhated, or does
I think this is a bit overhated. Yeah, I do like this a bit more than his other movies tend to be received. I'm not a fan of Bryce Dallas Howard in this. I hate the cameo that he has. Like, my review for it only mentions that the cameos are starting to piss me off. I'm just a genuine hater, man. His worst
cameo is old, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's another one where he's a bit more in it, and he makes himself a bit more. It's not Alfred Hitchcock, I'll say. But the cast again in this one is like truly impressive all around, and I feel like they are making something out of the idea again that is at the core interesting, and maybe like the twist isn't as great, and like the overall narrative isn't as great. But I like the atmosphere. I like the atmosphere so much of The Village. Like, it's great. It's actually like it's horrifying in points, and I like the drama. I eat it all up.
Yeah, I think this is the first film that Adrian Brody booked after winning the Oscar for The Pianist. I could be a little bit wrong on that, but immediately in the aftermath of it, for sure. So
insane pickup, yeah,
and getting Joaquin Phoenix pretty early on in terms of his ascendancy. I mean, really excellent cast on this one.
I'm a big defender of The Village. The Village is the one that I'm rooting for, and it's funny that we're talking about narratives. You said this is the one where he starts collapsing. Yet this is the one where he figured out how to fund his own movies and made $100 million off the back end there. So it's like a tale of two stories, pretty much.
Right, exactly. Like he has maybe some more of a critical and public opinion failure, but financially he's starting to figure out that model.
That's crazy.
Next up is Lady in the Water in 2006, a folk horror about an apartment complex superintendent who discovers a young woman in a swimming pool who has a connection to a mystical world.
This is Bad Village.
Yeah, this is where things really start to go bad, because this film gets 4 Razzie nominations, and I feel like Razzies meant a little bit more in this period than they do now.
Yeah, now they're on Criterion.
Exactly. This is also really notable for having Shyamalan's biggest role outside of Praying with Anger, and that, I think, is something that drew the ire of a lot of critics, particularly at the time. There's also the film critic character, where he's starting to poke fun at the people who gave him bad reviews for The Village, which creates even more of an antagonistic relationship. But I wanted to return to Lady in the Water with fresh eyes and see the value in it. and it's just so convoluted. It does not work for me at all. As much as I love, like Paul Giamatti and Jeffrey Wright and Freddie Rodriguez and stuff like that, it just, I don't know. This movie is a mess.
If you had to portray this film in one picture, you would use the Charlie Day in front of the red strings from Always Sunny. And the other thing I wrote down for this one is I also need a naked lady to solve my crossword puzzle. And then Bryce Dallas Howard again. I'm sorry, I'm not a fan.
Doesn't quite work.
That's about all I got there.
Yeah. She's great.
We get The Happening in 2008. A film about the environment inexplicably causing mass suicides. I've mentioned before that I grew up not really a big fan of horror movies and didn't see much. So this is my first M. Night Shyamalan movie. I saw this one in theaters opening weekend, and boy, for years I said this was the worst film I had ever seen, and I don't think I have a much higher estimation of it now. Are either of you defenders of The Happening at all?
Me? No. No.
Yeah.
No.
It's tough. Mark Wahlberg.
I do love plants, but
the dialogue is always hard to sell, but Mark Wahlberg in particular does not sell it. So,
did you rewatch it?
I rewatched parts. Caitlin hasn't seen it, so.
Oh, she hasn't seen it at all?
No.
This is one of my worst movies of all time. I think it's at the bottom of his list. I think this is worse than Airbender. This was a movie that after showing my family Cloverfield, they never wanted me to pick another movie again. I said, give me one more chance.
That's tough. That's a tough one.
It was 2008. There was a financial crisis, and I have not seen a movie with my family since. It's been a while. This is tore the family apart. I think it's a disaster. And
you have M. Night to blame for that.
When we rewatched it, Alina had this theory on it, and I'm like, stop. I think that if this plays now with this very eco-friendly world that we have, people would eat this up.
They'd maybe work a little harder to see the messages behind it, but I don't know, man.
They would stretch everything to make it,
hey,
bro, if they're trying to convince you that his daughter to give a good performance in that new one, of course they would have stretched out for this one. Oh, man. He just released it at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But he follows it up with even worse.
Maybe we need the 20-year re-release to truly appreciate this one. But then after it, we get what might be the true nadir of his career. In 2010, he makes The Last Airbender. He gets eviscerated. In 2013, he makes After Earth. That film gets eviscerated. Ewan, The Happening. We're trying to determine the best M. Night movie on this bracket, but is The Happening, The Last Airbender, or After Earth the winner of the worst M. Night movie?
The Happening is in my top 10 M. Night. I'm sorry.
It's top 10? That's not the highest compliment.
Because you've seen 10.
No, I've seen 16. I think The Last Airbender is the worst one. That's the only one I've actually given a half star to. And then
you watched the show?
4. I did watch it. I did watch the movie straight after watching the series, just so I could max the appreciation that I could have for it.
Did you watch the show, Zach?
No, I haven't watched the show.
The show's great.
But you've seen the movie?
No, so the only two that I did not see, I didn't make time for Airbender and After Earth. I decided I'd rather rewatch Unbreakable and Sixth Sense.
And you never saw After Earth either?
No, I never saw it.
The worst thing of After Earth is that that's a pompous project right after Pursuit of Happiness, right? They thought they could do another one with a big budget.
Story by Will Smith.
I see why Last Airbender gets the flag that it does, because, I mean, he ruined the property. He walked in on his girls watching it, and he's like, I'm going to make you guys happy. They're in the movie for one shot. That's what we noticed. No one's ever talked about this, but there is a random gratuitous shot of them when they go visit a village. I'm like, bro, I know the two because now you guys are on the big screen. One's directing a movie, and the other one's in a movie. This is the part where he really starts making things for his daughters. For good or for bad. I find it funny that that's the reason why people like Trap. And no one realizes that's the reason why they despise this movie right here. It was a gift to them. And an abomination for sure. But I think that if you're not a fan of the series, I don't think it's the worst. But if you're a fan of the series, this man couldn't even get the names right. And I knew that much. Crazy.
It could makes a great double feature with Borderlands.
Yeah.
Ooh. To knock out too.
Yeah, I guess a nice sleep aid. All right, so after spending most of a decade in kind of director jail, he has to have a comeback, and it comes in the form of 2015's The Visit, which ends up going to Blumhouse after self-financing it, as Art mentioned. And he's sort of bowing to the trends of the time and making a found footage movie here about a pair of young siblings who visit their estranged grandparents who start to behave bizarrely. I don't know how you guys felt about this one. It definitely is a big step up from where he had been, but I was very played out on the found footage genre by the time this one came out. And, M. Night does some fun things with the camera, as you would expect him to by this point, but I don't know. I did not have much patience for this movie.
This gives I'm sorry, this gives The Last Airbender a run for its money. I hate it.
Wow.
I hate it. It's like, it has the two child characters at the forefront with all of the acting, and I'm like, I can't.
And rapping.
Yeah. It's the, if you indulge in a bit of cringe in your pastime,
Right.
then maybe you get something more out of it. I couldn't deal with it. It's, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. I don't like usually kids in lead roles unless it feels it's like a more slower drama. I feel like just to generalize, and whenever it is in a bigger setting, it immediately becomes so much more scrutiny on my end to actually buy into it. And this
that is a thing that is pretty frequent in M. Night's career. More movies have child leads in them than don't, and sometimes you get Haley Joel Osment, and then other times you get this.
Hey, fast work days.
Yeah, exactly. Art, do you like The Visit a little bit more than us?
I still remember my review for it. At this point, I had already started A to Z. I remember saying, this is an F student getting a C, and we're all happy to see it, and that's the only reason. So the retrospective, this perspective is like, wow. And yeah, when you finally look at it out, we were just really happy he got out of that slump. But I never thought it was an A or a B. I just thought it was, hey, look, we're finally out of the failing territory. And I think it helps for the next one. I think there's a big confidence game that happens in the second half of his career. And I think he got the confidence for this next one over here.
Exactly. And it's 2016 Split, where it feels like he comes back for real, a genuine hit, both with critics and with audiences. One that was enough of a success that he would end up following it up with Glass in 2019. Which maybe didn't go as well. Looking back on the pair of the films, Art, do you feel like this was like a successful return to the Unbreakable property?
Yeah, this is him with an actual performance that I think really stands out. Anya Taylor-Joy stands out a lot. I think Haley Lou Richardson might have been in this one in the background. Yeah. Like, I think he just had a lot of really good cast members in this. He was actually able to get a good performance out of it. I think the story is interesting. I know there's like a through line that M. Night always uses, like people with disabilities kind of like in the background as a catalyst for his stuff. But I thought this one worked a lot, and especially that ending. When you're talking about what M. Night means to people and what they expect in a movie, wow, out of left field. This was one of those where when the score played at the end at that diner, there was no reason why I remembered. I felt it in my bones. I was like, why do I know where that score is from? And then you see the actor appear. And the worst part of it was that was a great ending to this movie, but it needed to be a build-up to something else. And he just flopped on that something else. I did not think Glass was that good. But Split, I think, still holds up.
Yeah, I agree with you.
This is my first M. Night movie. I jumped on the wagon way too late. Unless you count
2016, my G?
Yeah. No, I just never this was the first one I saw, yeah. I know, I've been super late.
He's coming at it with fresh eyes.
I was 18. And it came out.
You were old enough for the rating.
Yeah, you had to age into it.
Yeah. Like fine wine.
Do you care for Glass?
Which you weren't old enough to drink in the U.S. at the time.
I drank it. No. European drinking.
Between Split and Glass, though.
Split. Yeah, no,
Glass?
I mean, Split is so much better.
But I think Glass is bad.
I think
Yeah.
Glass is pretty bad as well.
I think he had to rush into it, and that was the worst part of it. Because I really do think that for Split, he had this idea, and he goes, "What if I just tied it in?" Do you know the behind the scenes to Split is that they're both different companies, Split and Unbreakable. So he's like, "How am I going to get this done?" I think it's also cool how he found a way. I think that's what made it such a big surprise. And he also was ahead of the curve doing this at what, 2016?
Right.
And now,
The cross-platform, multi-universe kind of thing.
with properties and stuff. So I think that was another thing he was ahead of the curve with.
Yeah. And then we get to this modern decade in which he's kind of entered into this zone of making these mid-budget thrillers, self-financed, that are original properties and very much feel like only M. Night could have made them. We get Old in 2021. We get Knock at the Cabin in 2023. He produced his daughter's directorial debut, The Watchers, earlier this year. Not on our bracket, but he did make Trap recently, which we reviewed on the podcast and will be on our bracket. Ewan, this sort of era that M. Night is in right now, do you think this is like perhaps him at his most comfortable, or do you are you not vibing with it as much as a resident M. Night hater?
Yeah. Should have gotten Sidney Volpe or someone on here who actually loves him. I like Knock at the Cabin quite a bit. I'm not sharing my ranked list. Maybe I can do that after the fact. But Knock at the Cabin is higher than you expect. I actually had a really good time with it, and it feels like he just knows what he wants to do, and all of the silliness that I'm a bit more in for it. I don't know what it is. It's just like Dave Bautista just really works well in there for me. Like the cast there just works really well. I didn't like Trap that much. I like the ideas, but I don't like where it goes. Where Trap is only part of that movie actually. And in Old, I thought it was just really bad. So it's a bit all over the place, but I feel like he still has the capability to bring us another Split, Unbreakable, Signs. I think he can do that again. And so, yes, I feel like he's confident. But that's not his focus. What he said, like, his family is a bigger focus on for him at this stage.
Yeah.
All right, so let's break into that bracket, though, because we've talked about all the movies, and now we got to decide what the best one is. I can breeze through this, so Art can still make his Alien Romulus screening.
Alien Romulus.
This bracket, unlike previous brackets we've done on the show, because M. Night has such an interesting history at the box office, is organized by box office. So the number one seed, The Sixth Sense, is his highest grossing movie, whereas the 16th seed, Praying with Anger, is a film that didn't get distribution and therefore is his lowest grossing film. Trap obviously is still in theaters, so its placement on this list will be subject to change, but we're locking it in here. And let's go through these bracket matchups, starting with The Sixth Sense versus Praying with Anger. I feel like we can pretty safely give this
Praying
one
with
to
Anger
The Sixth
from the 1
Sense.
yard line.
I do hate The Sixth Sense. Not that much.
Not that much.
I'm kidding. I don't hate it.
I'd hope. The next matchup is between The Happening and Glass. And Art, I know you said you are not a fan of Glass, but I don't think you dislike it quite that much.
Sheesh, the porta potty off right here, just pure garbage. Glass by the bare minimum.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you and choose Glass. Our next matchup is between The Village and Lady in the Water. And Ewan, I think we're taking The Village with this matchup.
For sure, yeah.
After that, it's Knock at the Cabin versus Split. Ewan,
no.
you're just saying
no.
You're a fan of both these films.
They are right next to each other on my ranked list. So
really?
Making it really tough.
But which one's
Split
above?
is above. Split is
there
above.
We go. You hear that?
Sucks.
It's Knock at the Cabin out of here. Get it out of here. Split.
You can't
split
say that
away,
we're split
baby.
on Split, because I would personally go Knock at the Cabin if we have to choose.
Okay.
What?
Well,
But
I'm gonna
I
go
like
with
Knock
Split.
at the Cabin.
I like it too, but I do like Split more.
All right.
What's wrong with y'all, bro? What? What?
All right, so Split wins that matchup. Our next one is between The Last Airbender and Trap. For me, this is an easy Trap victory.
You don't want to be trapped in a screening. Like, I'd rather be trapped with the butcher in a room than watch The Last Airbender.
The Last Airbender?
So, yeah.
The next matchup is between After Earth and Old. I know you're not neither of you are really fans of Old, but would either of you take After Earth above it?
I would actually.
Really?
Nah,
Yeah.
I was so old.
I'm gonna go just to split it with
Just to go after Earth.
Yeah. They're like right next to it, like both for 1 star to me. But
yeah.
there's
Don't
some
you love how,
cringy
like, with
dialogue that
old-
still makes me crack up.
Old and Knock at the Cabin, when everyone was spoiling the twists, all the endings to his first movies, no one brings up the endings to any of these other movies.
No.
It's always just the premise.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's kind of evolved
that
from
crazy?
the twist guy into the crazy premise guy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the dad guy.
Yeah. We're going with Unbreakable versus The Visit. I doubt anybody would take The Visit in this matchup. Wide Awake versus Signs.
Hear me out.
Art, no love for...
Hear me out. They're the same movie.
No, Rosie
Hey, we got Rosie O'Donnell, Mel Gibson, bro. You got to
Yeah.
pick right now on the podcast, recorded live.
I mean, I'm Rosie all day. Anyway. All right. In our round of 8, our first matchup is between The Sixth Sense and Glass.
That's the
I doubt
easiest thing I've ever
anybody's
seen in my life.
Except you and maybe would go with Glass. I don't know.
No. I don't. I feel like I played up for for the content. I played
Right,
up how much I
Yeah,
dislike.
you played
The
up a
Sixth
lot,
Sense.
bro. I'm like, no, this is going up again.
It's like my Sixth Sense is feeling all the hate that's coming towards
Yes,
me.
sir. I see dead humans. All right.
But no, I'll take it over that as well, over Glass.
Art, how do you feel about The Village versus Split?
I'm going to hit you with this one, bro. The Village, baby.
Really?
I like what he's saying in The Village. I'm going to hit you. I think it's
Interesting.
almost even a metaphor that when you're in that contained space, when you're in the movie theater with him, he's telling you, shh, don't let it leave this area. It's almost like a promise he's making with the viewer. The Village, I think it's one of his most, I think it is the most underrated movie he's made.
Wow. Ewan, you going to go with him?
I agree, but I'll still pick Split.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Art. I'm not as high on The Village. You were talking
Michael
about
Pitt.
having the ending ruin it for you. That's how I felt about The Village, knowing the ending going into that.
I didn't know the
movie.
ending to this one, so maybe it really is important to not know the ending to this stuff. I feel like
Yeah,
it takes
maybe.
it really
Bro, Jesse
long.
Eisenberg's in this. It's
Yeah.
such a young, good cast.
It's got
bro.
a crazy
fire.
cast.
It's good.
Judy
And
Greer,
this is
Fran Kranz, William
Yeah, it's
Hurt.
great.
And this is one of those where I think that the way that the dialogue is portrayed fits perfectly. So
Totally.
Yeah, it's the
Bye,
one,
Village.
it's always about like doing these brackets to shout the movies out, maybe like the Wide Awakes or the Praying with Anger. Obviously, you gotta go and watch those, but just like the full rounded thing. And then I feel like
Yeah.
The Village might be one that people haven't caught up with yet. And
like Zach was
Yeah.
saying, the idea to pick up someone after their Oscar. Michael Pitt, who
Yeah.
was big overseas for like The Dreamers at that point. I was like, bro, this shows how good of a filmmaker he was. And then obviously he did the run that he goes after.
How about Trap versus Old? Two films that feel like horror films that I think are actually kind of comedies. Personally,
intentionally,
I would go intentionally. I'm going to go with Old in this one. I don't know. That movie just really tickles me, and it has this sense of creepiness that I very much vibe with.
Which one?
Old.
Zach, you got to show me like your Spotify rap. This mid-sized sedan on there, like happening?
Absolutely. I'm bumping that every day.
Yeah, where'd you vacation, bro? The beach? Makes you old?
Are you
I'm going
noticing
trap.
my
makes you
gray-
like old.
Are you noticing my new gray hairs?
I'm going trap, bro. I can't go old. But both of them, like we're saying, this is the era where he made old because the graphic novel was recommended by his daughter. Then she was, first AD. She got to help get some practice for her movie. Trap. He made a
Exactly.
concert for his little girl. So they're both him in full dad mode, but I got to go
Yeah.
trap. So I guess we leave it to you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Trap as well. It's the bigger dad move. I mean, we got the watches out of the other one. Music over the directorial debut of his. I'll
little
take the
bit more,
music
yeah.
over it.
Alright,
So
none
by the Nepo comparisons, I'll go with Trap.
All right, none of y'all
He's
are
not voting,
invited to
buddy.
my beach that makes you old party. Unbreakable versus Signs, two of the early
Crazy.
career
Good.
M. Night films. I think this is
This
his
is tough.
second highest grossing and third highest grossing. Oh, no, actually, I'm mistaken. Airbender somehow is the third highest grossing movie. Signs is the second highest, though. I feel like a lot of people, this is like, if you don't say that Sixth Sense is your favorite M. Night movie, you're
It
going to
has to
say
be.
one of these two.
Yeah.
So, Art,
Is that yeah? Sorry, I was just going to ask if you can adjust for inflation and we can bump it up into to go up against like the others. This is
maybe I
tough.
should. Maybe I should.
Yeah, this is the one where it should not be at this round. This is a
Yeah.
semifinal match.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm gonna go Signs though.
Interesting. Ewan, how you feeling?
I'm gonna go with Unbreakable, but I do like Science quite a bit too.
Wow.
All right. I am narrowly going to go with Unbreakable, and it's this
You're
is one.
betraying art here, left and right. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, buddy. This is the one where I kind of feel like it just.
It's the Gibson of it all.
If I wake up on a different day, I might feel differently because there's so much stuff in Signs that I love. In revisiting it and seeing the particularly, we were talking about child performances so much. This is one of the better ones in the duo of Rory Culkin and Abigail Breslin.
Her debut as well, I think.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff, bro. This is really good stuff. The way Ewan was breaking down Sixth Sense about how after you watch the movie and you see, the cups were there, all these different things that go with it, it's beautiful. It's fantastic. I think it's aged very well. It's the reason why Scary Movie 3 is so funny. It's the basis to the parodies in Scary Movie 3. Yeah. And I would even say this. Sixth Sense has always been my number one. And I don't know how. But for one day, Signs did top it after I did my rewatch.
We'll see what ultimately wins here, because I don't know, man. There's something about, I feel like it's like a stoicism almost to how he portrays Unbreakable that really has this epic quality to it that I feel like a lot of superhero films actually miss.
Yo, this Signs dirty, bro. Look at how far behind.
I'm sure a lot of people will agree with you. A lot of people will agree with you there. Okay, the semifinals. First, we've got The Sixth Sense versus Split. Ewan, are you really going to choose Split?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Right, I don't think Art and I are split on this one. We're gonna put Sixth Sense into the final.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Sixth Sense because I got to split. Sixth Sense.
And then Trap versus Unbreakable.
No, it's Unbreakable. Yeah.
Everybody goes Unbreakable there. So Art, are you comfortable giving this to The Sixth Sense above Unbreakable?
Easily. For me, my top 5 has been Sixth Sense and Signs. With this last rewatch, kind of flipping it over. Signs above Sixth Sense, which I never thought. But it does go Sixth Sense, Signs. Unbreakable's my number 3. Followed by The Village. I'm a defender. Nice. And then Split. So I'm confident in this one. Sixth Sense. And
you would probably go Unbreakable here, right?
I have Unbreakable as my number 1.
But that's fair.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It got followed up by if we're revealing our top 5 here, I guess, which I guess for the next one, you'd have to go to 6 to get the Sixth Sense. I thought that was kind of fitting.
Damn, bro.
Because I do have Split, Knock at the Cabin, Signs, and The Village in front of it. Yeah.
Oh, man.
It might change a lot on the rewatch where I'm like not just nitpicking, but this first experience wasn't it. I feel like Signs could also move up, but I do have Knock at the Cabin at like, hey, there's 3 knocks at the cabin. My number 3, maybe a bit over. Like that's gonna be controversial, I know, but Unbreakable. It's my pick.
And that's your number 1, right?
Nice.
Yeah, my number 1. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm going to vote for Sixth Sense in the finale here because my top 5, I'm really happy. My number 1 is Sixth Sense. My number 2 is Unbreakable. That is the number 1 and 2 on the bracket. Number 3, I also have Signs. I wasn't happy. I'll vote against it, but I did have to.
Believe it.
Number 4, I got old. I'm sorry, guys. I really enjoy this movie. Maybe it's just a meme, but I really enjoy it. And then rounding out my top 5, it's honestly a fight between Knock at the Cabin and Trap. I really enjoyed Trap as well. But I want to see, when I have a little more distance too, from both those movies, because those are the most recent ones, how I ultimately feel. Art, if you got to bounce, Ewan and I can wrap this up too. I'll do your shout out for you.
All right, for sure. But yeah, I'm curious to know what the inner cuties have as their favorites. Who messed up the most here? Did you have a Sixth Sense and you knew exactly where this was going to go? What is the most underrated one, and what would you like to see M. Night do? I think we're going to get at the point where we're bound for another resurgence. I think he's going to go on another run.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially now that he seems to be really in a groove. So
yeah.
All right, so we got The Sixth Sense winning our M. Night Shyamalan movie bracket. Sorry so much, Ewan. I know that wasn't your top pick, but I feel like that's generally considered to be the best M. Night movie.
I was here to be the antagonist, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Totally fine with that.
I was curious to see if we would get, like an Unbreakable or a Signs breakthrough somehow, be a little bit contrarian with it. But
Yeah.
Art and I have to stick with the classics. So those are most of our thoughts. Some of our thoughts, maybe not even all half of our thoughts on M. Night Shyamalan, but a lot of our thoughts on M. Night Shyamalan. As Art mentioned, let us know your thoughts on M. Night. But we want to thank Ewan for once again joining us for a filmmaker bracket. Ewan, where can people find more from you?
Yeah, you can find me over on the Quiet on Set podcast. We also have, much like you guys, an account over on Letterboxd that you can follow. And yeah, we have a new show out every Monday and make reviews as well. So go check that out if you're interested. And you don't totally hate me for for not liking The Sixth Sense. I keep saying hating. I keep digging my own hole. I'm so sorry.
Right?
I don't hate
worse.
it. I just like it less than everyone else. I'm sorry.
Shyamalan's got a lot of haters out there, and I think they need a voice sometimes too. So if you need some more of that, you got the Quiet on Set podcast.
Sure. Well, I should mention I actually promised him this. Our producer Kevin likes all of the Shyamalan stuff way more. He has like Trap in his like top 5 or top 10 of the year so far. So shout out to him. He would have much rather come on here. He's gonna tell everyone on our side that I was wrong about this, and hey, that's fine with me.
Yeah. Well, you can catch more from me, Zach Shevich, at ZSHEVICH across social media, or at Multiplex Show wherever you find videos, and catch more from Arturo at LME Movies. Of course, I'm sure you're following him on Let Me Explain on YouTube. And you can catch more from us here on Intercut by subscribing to the podcast, either with your favorite podcatcher, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts. I use Overcast. They got a new update recently, though, that I'm still trying to figure it out. But it's still a good platform. And if you're not subscribed to the just the audio, make sure you subscribe to the video as well, which is available at youtube.com/intercutpod. You can watch our talked out faces. We've been talking for me and Art were on here for like almost 4 hours now.
Yeah.
As we run through the latest in entertainment, find new episodes of the Intercut Weekend Must Watch streaming on our YouTube channel every Monday. And please leave us a comment, like the videos, consider heading over to iTunes to give us that much requested 5-star review. We chart in a bunch of countries, and that's always really exciting to see. But we also could really use those reviews because they help boost us up the charts and do a lot to help spread the podcast. So shout out to our listeners across the globe. And shout out to everybody who follows us on social media, whether you're following us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Letterboxd, our new Letterboxd that Ewan mentioned, letterboxd.com/intercutpod. Whether you are a supporter on Patreon, a supporter on YouTube, you can support us on Spotify now as well. Whether you are in our Discord, which you can catch a link to in the description of this episode. Those are great ways to get updates from us throughout the week, whether it's from Art, from me, or any of the guest hosts that we feature on this podcast. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, I don't drink water that tastes old.